Well, hey there, kids. Welcome to another episode of Rimshots with Sean. I'm remote. I'm in Fredericton at Dolan's Pub. Played here last night, playing here Friday, playing here Saturday. But enough about me. I picked up this book. Well, it was gifted to me about a week and a half ago. And I found it through a Facebook page called Eric Carr Revealed. And the author, Janet Symmons. Where are you located right now, Janet?
Right now I'm hanging out in Toronto for the holidays, and then I'm going back to BC, back home to
Awesome.
BC.
What part of Toronto are you in?
Well, I'm in the East End.
Nice. I lived at Greenwood and Danforth for 7 years.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm a bit further out. I'm in Scarborough.
Nice. So right out of the gate, I'm a sponge when it comes to Eric Carr. I mean, when I first started playing, I remember seeing that People magazine ad at the Sobeys in Dartmouth, and I grabbed it. And what led you to, I guess, the decision to write a book about Eric?
Well, I've been an Eric Carr fan probably as long as you have, from day one when we all heard that, Peter has left. And I remember hearing on the radio here, I think it was on Chum in Toronto at the time, that they have a new drummer, and they didn't know who it was. The great search was on, and then a little later on they announced, well, we have that new drummer and we're going to reveal him at the Palladium. And from there, it just like, well, who is this guy? Let me back up a little bit, because I didn't think Peter Criss was fitting very well with the band at the time. Look at his solo album and and then they used Vinnie Poncia again for the producer for the two follow-up albums, Dynasty and Unmasked. And I thought, there's just something wrong here. Is this Peter's doing? Does he want Vinnie in, or I'm leaving, kind of thing? Because there was rumors of Peter leaving. So I got into Eric just to follow his story, and it was the perfect underdog story. He almost quit. He was on the verge of turning 30, and he almost quit. He almost gave up drumming after 15 years of playing in the club. And what a struggle that is. But it was just a chance meeting with the former keyboardist for his last cover band, because he always played in cover bands. It's just a chance meeting that he heard about the Kiss audition. And I was like, wow, how does that happen? It's luck, it's talent. And that just got me so involved in, who is this person? And then when Creatures came around to playing in Toronto in January of 1980, Kiss came around to play Creatures tour in Toronto in January of 83, I had to see it. Well, I was a huge Creatures fan. It was a fantastic album. And yeah, he blew me away as a drummer. It's like, wow. He could sing, he could put on a performance, and he just blew me away. When he finished off that show with Black Diamond, it's like my chin was to the ground, like, wow.
And I mean, there's so much I want to ask you, but one of the things that I got out of the book, and I'm hoping that this is kind of a point that you made or meant to make. I got the sense that he never felt secure that he was going to be the guy in the band over a long period of time. I just always felt like he was always fighting for his place, which is kind of sad, given his talent, given the fact that he was a person. But is that the sense that you got when you were researching it?
At the beginning, yes. And as you'll find out with future books, because this is volume one, that he progresses, and you can see that progression in his confidence as it continues. But when he joined the band, he had Bobby Rondinelli, who basically came in second for the audition. He was like in the rearview mirror, and nobody knew in the Kiss, entourage, that Bobby was no longer available because he decided to move on and go with Rainbow. So Eric's thinking, gee, if I screw this up, you got Bobby to replace me. And and Kiss is probably thinking the same thing. But after, a while, they've invested so much time and energy in Eric, they probably couldn't go back, even if they wanted to. So by the time they hit the Unmasked tour, it goes off to Europe and then Australia. There's no turning back, because Eric has fit in seamlessly. And he just basically won fans over by his fantastic performance. And he so wanted to perform. But he was always, at that point in time, during the Unmasked era, he's a bit, what's going to happen if I mess up? And you can't really blame him. I mean, he's been put in this situation. It's like a pressure cooker he'd been put in, and he just flew to the races with it. He did a fantastic job. But then later on, you'll see his confidence starts to build as he starts to feel more at home in Kiss, and it's contributing more.
I can't wait for the next volumes because this one was like it ended, and then you did the teaser, and I'm like, no, Janet, what are you doing to me? What are you doing to me? But perfect setup, right? Perfect setup. It's like almost
Yeah.
like the Who Shot JR thing. We got to wait till the next season, right? So it's listed as an unauthorized biography, and like I say, anybody and Janet and I have just met, so it's not me pitching her book. It's a fantastic read. Did you get any pushback from anybody? Was there any people that? And I asked this because Michael Brandwold, who used to work for Kiss in their social media, is a fan who's outspoken, and he never gets any pushback from the band or whatever. Did you get any pushback from anybody on this?
Well, I didn't talk to anyone in the band. I didn't talk to any of the 4 original members, and really, there's no point in me talking to Tommy or Eric Singer because,
Right.
right. So no, I didn't get any pushback from them. I haven't heard anything from anybody. From the Caravello family, I asked Loretta for an interview, and she politely declined, and that's why I said, okay, it's got to be an unauthorized biography. But I have used a lot of interviews that I did when I was working with, well, it wasn't working, it was volunteering for the Eric Carr Tribute Committee newsletter back in the early 90s. So I've used those because the person who owns all of that stuff gave me the copyright to go ahead and do it. So there's some really good interviews from the early days there.
And we're going to take our first break here in a second. I don't ask you to give away any of your trade secrets, but in terms of because your sources seem so amazing, they seem so like the information. I mean, some of it, because as a fan, and you would know this, you hear some stuff, you go, "Oh yeah, I've heard that 1,000 times," but then there's a little tidbit where you go, "Wow."
Yep.
One for me in particular was this employment contract, which I had no idea. I had heard different things. How much digging did you have to do to find these people to get information?
Well, I've been collecting bits and pieces for, a few decades at this point. So it was basically taking all this data and pulling it together and making it tell its own story. So when I got I'm going to just say a bundle of a coin, what do you call them, memos and whatnot that they'd given to the band, and a copy of the employment contract was in there. So I was very fortunate in that respect. So I had the draft that was dated, I think it was July 22nd off the top of my head. And then the one he signed on July 24th, so 2 days later. And I could do a comparison of what changed over those last 2 days. I do not know if this was the final draft before he signed, or he'd gone through, one different draft every week. So I don't know the type of negotiations that were involved in it. But it's a really interesting because you can see the slight and subtle changes throughout. So to me, the biggest problem was actually looking at all those, the YouTube videos of interviews. I have my own interview tape collection, those old cassette tapes that Eric had done umpteen gazillion years ago, plus all of the interviews and fanzines. It's like gathering all of this data and then sorting it so it can tell its own story. And then I had to look at Gene and Paul's and a little bit of Ace's autobiography and pull bits and pieces from there as well, because that's their official story. So pulling everything together was that's the problem. Everything's scattered with Eric's story, and I'm trying to just bring it together.
Just before the break, the negotiation of this contract is, I remember you talking in the book about a change. So I just had this vision in my head of him sitting around the kitchen table with Albert, and his dad's telling him, "No, change this." Because I've never met Albert, but everybody that I know that has, he's just this great little man who loved his kid, and I just picture him as that guy that would make sure that his kid wouldn't get messed over.
Well, I don't know who exactly Eric talked to at that point. I know he did talk to Paul Torino, who was the keyboardist that told him about the audition. They became really good friends. They stayed lifelong friends, actually. So I know he talked to him about it, and Paul Torino was a bit iffy. He was like, "Nah, well, you don't have too much room to negotiate." And honestly, I don't think Eric Carr at that point had those negotiation skills. I mean, you're fresh out of the clubs, and all of a sudden you're here's a lawyer, here's Gene Symmons, and here's Paul Stanley sitting in front of you. What are you going to do?
Right.
But the leverage wasn't really there anyway, because if he didn't sign, then Bobby Rondinelli's next in line. So, and gee, will he fit in the same fox suit? Put them all in that.
He wouldn't now. If seen Bobby, but he would now. But anyway, we're going to take.
I did want to add one more thing to what you said, and that's about Eric's father. I did meet him. He was an absolutely wonderful man, and unfortunately, he did pass away last year.
That's and again, I've had friends that have visited where they're buried and stuff. That's actually a dream of mine. As funny as it sounds, but and his dad just always came across as this jovial little fella that
Yeah.
I think everybody would like. We're going to be back after this with Janet Symmons. Welcome back to Rimshots with Sean. I'm here with Janet Symmons, PhD, I might add, and this wonderful book Eric Carr revealed. And like I said in the first segment, Volume 1. It's kind of like when I was a huge Sopranos fan, and they would take 2.5 years off before the next season started. Hopefully, that's not going to happen here.
No, it's not going to happen here. I've got a couple of interviews that I'm just dying to get for hopefully in the next month or two, and then finish writing up book 2, and that should be out in about a year. I'm trying to get this out in time for the Christmas season for next year.
So in terms of the evolution of the story, were you into, I guess, Volume 2 kind of while Volume 1 was going on? You kind of go, well, you know what? I need to put a pin into that.
I was going to write this as one book.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, well, because you can do it all by the album cycle, right? It's pretty easy. It's all laid out. And then this thing started getting bigger and bigger. And next thing you know, it's not going to fit in 2 books. Hang on, it's got to be 3. Hang on, it's got to be, by the time you're done, I mean, I don't know. This is 388 pages. Now,
well, I was going to say, Janet, you're a PhD and I'm not, so I usually measure my books by thickness. So this is the perfect thickness for me.
Okay, so if this was 3 or 4 times this thick, would you have read it? It would have been intimidating, I would have thought.
Oh, I would read it just because I'm one of those people that when I get interested in, I love history. I love music history. Years ago, I found there was never enough info about Eric Carr. Like you'd find little tidbits, and like I said, some of it I knew, but then there was other pieces that, like, I had no idea why. And you stated it so well, why the design of the makeup changed. And you had mentioned that Bill O'Coing said when they were doing the Palladium show, it wasn't, I guess, vivid enough for people way in the back to see, so they changed the design a little bit.
Yeah, he called it a black blotch, I believe.
Right.
Is Bill's wording for it. So, there was always changes going on. I mean, even when he was, when he was a Hawk for that first week or so, he had 3 versions of it before they finally came up with the final. And then he designed the Fox. I guess that would be the second week of July. He designed the Fox makeup. And we know that because his birthday card signed by Coin Management's office staff called him Eric and called him the Fox. So we know that by July 12th, probably the 11th, he'd already got the persona and his name sorted out. But then he had about, I think, 3 or 4 different versions of the original Fox makeup until we see the final one on, that was the July 24th photo shoot, July 23rd. You'll have to look it up in the book. I can't remember which day it is, 23rd, whatever. That's one we see on the cover of People magazine. And then he changes it. No, he does Palladium, and then Bill mentions that it looks like a bit of a blotch there, and he quickly changed it. He called it Streamlined until 2 days later on the 27th they did the filming for Kids Are People too. So it was really, really quick. He didn't have time to waste. I mean, the pressure was there, and he reveled in it. It was fantastic for me. Loved it.
Iconic design, no question. And I remember seeing it at first glance, and the brown around his eyes. I thought, oh, he's leaving almost like he's not doing any makeup. Then you look, and it's like brilliant.
Yeah, it's that orange, right? So,
right.
and it matched the rest of his outfit, like his bolero jacket and things like that. So that was perfect. And then when you get later on in his makeup, you can look at Creatures. I know we've gone beyond the book a bit, but he still has the orange there because he's still retaining that Fox look.
Yeah. And I sent you a picture. I don't know if you remember. A friend of mine does marionettes, and he actually did a marionette of the Creatures.
Yes. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very cool. And so one of the things that I'm going through, and they're interviewing him, and they're saying, you can guarantee us that there's no pictures of you, or people don't know who you are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then there was the fire, right?
Yeah.
And I'm astounded, even back then, how there wasn't a movie camera or TV camera asking, because he pulled some of his bandmates out of that tragedy. How do you think they were able to
person out? He pulled the lead singer Sarita out. They were standing at the For people who don't know, they were in a club at the end of June 1974, and the club was called Gulliver's, and there was a little bit of a recess in the floor, and about 7 stairs down, and that we call the pit. And in the pit is where the band would be, and you'd have people dancing to it. Whereas up in Gulliver's, they could overlook and look down into the band and have dinner and drinks and whatever, right? So when the fire breaks out, Eric Carr is standing at the bottom of this 7 set of stairs with Sarita, and all of a sudden smoke comes through, and basically all hell breaks loose. And he grabs Sarita and makes it out the door. And 2 of his bandmates actually died in that fire. So George Chase and Damon DeFees died in that fire. So he had a very interesting background. He had a lot of things happen to him. It just wasn't, oh, I was playing the clubs. But like you were saying, there weren't any cameras around because that was really pre-camera days.
Right.
Unless, you're not going to have a camera there unless you can actually see the fire. It's not going to be brilliant for TV whatsoever. So they basically sent their newspaper reporters there. And you can find these reports in the New York Times and all this other interesting places. And also in the archives. Is it Winchester County? I think it is. If you go to the Winchester County archives, you can see pictures of it. And you can see that the twisted metal I-beams were so hot that they twisted and then they fell down into the pit. And yeah, it was devastation.
So what do you think is somebody that came in? I mean, he was, I guess, an unknown in a sense, but in the club scene, he wouldn't have been an unknown because he had, a number of years in various bands. How do you think they were able to, I guess, suppress who he was? I mean, a name change is one thing, but you got family and everybody knows, right? Nobody cares what you're doing until something good happens and they all want to be a part of it, right? How do you think they were able to suppress it as well as they did?
Well, I'm sure like the neighbors knew, right? Because all of a sudden there he is, he's got a better haircut and he's got all this other stuff happening and he's in and out and doing a lot of different things. So how can I put it? It was like the world's worst open secret around him.
Right.
Particularly in January 1981, he goes off to the Broadway Pirates of party, and he's there with his girlfriend. And Pantera, isn't hiding her face. And anyone who knew Paul Caravello before he became famous would have said, well, I know that face. And they could have easily put 2 and 2 together. And I believe that a photo of them appeared in the New York Daily News or something like that. So it was the world's worst kept secret if you were in, the periphery or if you knew of him at all. But yeah, they kept it all under wraps. And I think it's because the reporters didn't want to let it out because it's a great story. Right. I mean, do that now, but
for sure. And I mean, everybody would be looking for that scoop. Something that I got from when I was reading, and again, this I'll ask you the question. It might be purely your opinion. So when I read Paul Stanley's book, he said some rather nasty things about Eric. I think. What I got from your book was that maybe him and Paul weren't super tight. Maybe he might not have been Paul's choice, and Paul was maybe vetoed. I don't know if that's the case or not, but there was just something there that they weren't tight. And with Paul, he might have always been kind of in the crosshairs. Is that a fair statement?
I don't think crosshairs would be a fair statement, but I don't think that they were the best of friends. Let's put it that way.
Right.
So I had the feeling that everybody liked Eric Carr. I mean, right. I've yet to meet anyone who has anything bad to say about Eric, except for Paul Stanley, which I found kind of interesting. And when I was reading through Paul's autobiography, little red flags started popping up because I can't remember what chapter it was in, but he was talking about Eric going into the bathtub with this reporter in Glasgow. Well, that didn't happen in that tour. He's getting everything all mixed up. And he's also saying that Eric Carr wore Peter Criss's boots. Well, no, it was actually Vinnie Vincent's boots. Vinnie Vincent wore Ace's boots. And there's photographs of that happening in December 1982, the first photo shoot with Vinnie. So he's getting a lot of these stories mixed up. But what really got me is the stories he chose to tell. And he didn't say anything good, not about just Eric, but anybody.
Right.
He didn't say anything really nice about Gene or Ace or anybody. Yeah. So to me, there's I don't know, maybe there's a chip on his shoulder about something, or maybe he's looking at, if I tell bad stories, maybe I can sell more books. I don't know what he's thinking.
Right.
So I had to try and dig into all of these different instances that he'd provided about Eric, such as Eric wants a camouflage Porsche and things like that. Well, hang on, he'd never asked for that. Before, he never wanted to stand out in a negative light. So why would he do that now? But looking at Eric's sense of humor, I could see him easily joking about that. And perhaps Paul took him seriously. You don't know. So it's looking at things and questioning.
Sure. You mentioned the Porsche. You might be able to clear something up because a friend of mine said that I had heard that it was actually Paul Stanley's Porsche and he gave it to him and it was a lemon the whole time that he had it.
No, it wasn't, because that Porsche actually wound up in one of the casinos in Las Vegas after a while. And in the back window of that, and there's a film or video on it on YouTube, when the Porsche was eventually taken away to be fixed because it's been sitting so long. They actually had the letter there that Paul, Gene, and Ace had sent Eric, saying, go pick up the Porsche. It's go, figure out what color you want, this, that, and the other. You can clearly see it, and they had taken it and blown it up big to put it in the back window for everybody to see. So no, it was not Paul's Porsche at all.
You heard it here, folks. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with Janet Symmons after this. Well, welcome back to Rimshots with Sean, brought to you by Barstools and Bandtalk. I'm here with Janet Symmons, and thanks a lot for doing this, Janet, by the way.
Oh, my pleasure.
The book is Eric Carr Revealed, Volume 1. Volume 2 is going to be out. You heard it here. November, hopefully next year in time for Christmas. One of the things that booked me too was when you laid out the employment contract, how much he was compensated, little sorts of odds and ends that he got. And then you talked about how he was very frugal. He was still, budgeting and figuring out how much money he would spend, and you would break down, he was paying this for rent, which would be in today's dollars. Was he a frugal guy all the way through?
I think so. I don't think that he saved a lot of his money. I think he went out and had a lot of fun. Like, not in drugs and alcohol and things like that, but he just wanted to go out and have fun. And I don't think that he bought what he wanted, because all of a sudden it's like, wow, I've just won the lottery. And so he's making $10,000 a year, in 3 years playing the clubs, and then all of a sudden he's making 100,000. Now, 100,000 today may not seem huge, but when you put it into today's currency, that's like $380,000 US. Sure. So all of a sudden he's gone from nothing to, I can buy whatever I want. P.S. I just got a brand new car, so I don't have to lay out for that. So he was frugal in a way, but he also knew how to enjoy himself. That's how I'm going to put it, because when they cleaned out his car, he had maps in there, and he was going places. He was looking to have fun. Sure, why not?
That's great. It's like we rehearsed this, because one thing that I love when I read books and different sorts of things, I get fascinated with addresses and where people live. And you actually list addresses of where he lived, or certain landmarks. And the house in Brooklyn was amazing. The house that he bought, I guess you said, was in Long Island. That took him an hour and a half to get into.
I think that was probably, looking at it, I can't find any papers to say that he actually bought it, so he may have probably rented it.
But then when he took the condo downtown in Greenwich Village, and I geeked out. I went to Google Maps and I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. But for a guy that was playing in a world-class band, pretty modest in a sense.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the last part?
Well, pretty modest. I mean, like, it wasn't a mansion, and that's why I guess the frugal thing. I get the feeling that, hey, you know what? I don't want to spend all my money on lodging or all this stuff, right?
No. But I also have receipts that he purchasing furniture as well, and I'm sure his girlfriend was out doing the same, because all of a sudden now they've got to get themselves together. They're not going to probably use the same falling apart furniture that they had when they were listing in the projects. It was a newish project that was built a few years earlier, but they had moved out from there. So he was buying some nice things, mirrors and bureaus and things like that. But it wasn't this huge place that wasn't a mansion. It was a 2-story condo. I think it was probably about 1,200 feet, something like that. I know, and he was doing a little bit of renovation work with it as well. So hey, he's having fun with it, but he's not going out to buy the top of the line whatever because he is being a bit frugal. He still has
Is it
that confidence.
wrong? Is it wrong that I was hearing the theme from Friends when I saw the apartment in Greenwich Village? Because I'm doing the spin and it's like, wow, like, and that's 1980, 182, I guess.
Yeah, he bought that in 1981 while they were doing The Elder up here in Toronto. And he had his real estate agent and Pantera looking around. And sometimes he'd fly back and he'd look at things. So yeah, well, Kiss was back and forth during that Elder period. They were up in Toronto and down there as well. So it was a very interesting time for him because he's reaping these rewards, but little does he know that the Elder's about to, flop basically. And it's like, well, now what do I do? Because if the part of his contract stated that if the band was to disband or he would be fired, he could never admit that he was in Kiss. He didn't own his name, so he could never admit that he was Eric Carr, couldn't use that professionally, and he would have to revert to going back to Paul Caravello, which is his birth name. So yeah, I mean, the pressure's on, but he's going to have some fun with it, and he's going to live like he's a rock star, but a modest rock star.
Well, and I mean, his story, I mean, I've known his story, but to read it again, it really is a story of, I guess, the little guy kind of keep plugging away and he keeps at it. A story of confidence, just believing in yourself. You know what? I might not be the best, but I'm going to do something. And talk a little bit about that because I mean, he wasn't a big man. He was what, 5'7"?
Yeah, he was about 5'7". I've heard people say, "Oh, he was 5'2". No, he wasn't a midget. It's okay.
Yeah.
No, he was about 5'7", and he'd probably say and a quarter or something like that. I don't know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but and he stood tall behind those drum kits as well, and he had huge drum kits. I mean, the first one that he used with Kiss was that nice chrome silver Ludwig kit, and 8 pieces. And well, how do you see this little guy behind it all? And he was really good at putting on a show. And yeah, I've lost track of your question. I'm so sorry.
No, but it was just basically about him kind of not taking no for an answer, and keep battling. And anybody, like I said, I'm behind my drum kit. Anybody that plays drums knows it's a physical instrument. It's almost like sports. If you're a bigger person, you're going to be able to maybe do it a little bit more effortlessly. I set it about 5'10", depending upon the shoes that I'm wearing. So I wouldn't consider myself huge, but I do know what physically goes into it. And when you would see him behind those monstrous kits, I would geek out and I'd like, how does his arms get there? How does he, and it was just amazing how obviously it's set up for him, but the power that he got for his stature was quite incredible.
Yeah, it was incredible because, but he also had his drum techs put it in the exact same spot every time. But he was also very versatile because when they recorded The Elder, that wasn't his drum kit that they used. I mean, they couldn't fit it into Bob Ezrin's little tiny farmhouse room at the basement of it, which apparently was, 10 foot by 10 foot. And they squeaked everything in there just long enough to record Escape from the Island, which is a fantastic song. I love that one. But how he got that power out of there and that reach, especially later on when he gets even these huge drum kits with crazy nights, and he's got the electronic drum pads and everything. How he reached those, I don't know, but yeah, he was just thunder, wasn't he?
Well, absolutely. I mean, just all kinds of power. After I finished your book, I went back and I listened to Animalize because somebody kind of said to me, "Oh, he might not have been the best," and Into the Fire. I listened to that tune, and that is that and King of the Mountain for me are two Eric Carr's signature tunes. Simply because he had this, and I'm going to geek out here for a second, but he had a way of playing beats that where you thought the beat was going to go, it would almost be instead of a 2/4, it'd be a 3/1, and almost awkward. And I just, just to be able to do that when most people would take the easy way, he always seemed to be a little more creative and adventurous in his playing. That's what blew me away about him, and the fact that he could sing was great.
So, okay, so a question to you then, because you're saying he's singing as well. So how difficult is it to sing and play drums at the same time?
To me personally, because I have a hard enough time getting out of this chair and walking across the bar. I'll tell you, I've said this for years. So anybody that's a singing drummer, so I would take Don Henley, I would take Gilmore from Triumph, Peter Criss, Eric. There's Collins. A different way of, and any of those guys, the fellow from or an American band. Because of what you have to do, you almost, when you're singing, you almost have to divorce your body from what you're playing. I think that you become a different player that is not easily, if at all, replicated, if that makes sense.
Because he was doing that from when he was 15 years old, 16 years old.
Well, and you had mentioned something about some of the tunes that they used to do, and I went on to YouTube and the band that was playing the bar that was in the fire. They were
Creation.
Yes, he was doing a couple of old standards, and I'm like, wow, like better than maybe the original singer that I had heard. And it's like, and he's playing the drum. It was actually very like for me, it was great because you didn't really get to see him sing that much unless you saw something live.
Yeah.
But when you did, it was just like, I totally get why he was in here, right? Great raspy voice, great at the harmonies, and just brought a little punch to what he was doing.
Well, it wasn't just a raspy voice, because going forward in time, we can look at what he did with Beth. And also, when we're looking at what he did for the demo tape that he submitted to Kiss, he sang Shandy. And that was the only song that he sang that was submitted. I mean, he played the drums on Torpedo Girl, and I love the drum pattern on there. That is so cool what he did. Plus, he also did 2 Van Halen songs. So to me, that was saying, I'm into the harder stuff. Here's my Van Halen stuff, which he played in the band Flasher. And then he chose the more contemporary stuff that Kiss was doing. But to sing to Shandy, it gives him that softer voice, which we later on see in Beth. So he was very much a chameleon in some ways with his voice, because back in the day, he could also, one of the songs he did, Obla Di Obla Da by the Beatles, for example.
So we don't want to get too far ahead because there is going to be a volume 2, but I'll wrap with a couple questions. So he would have been 74. Which he probably would have been the youngest looking 74-year-old man, because he always had that baby face. I was watching a Kiss, and it might have been one of their, I don't know, it was the Monsters of Rock, and somebody asked Paul Stanley, would he still have been the drummer in Kiss? And all Paul said was no.
Yes, I can understand that.
Quick no. Do you feel that would have been the case?
Probably, because I don't think it's a well-kept secret that Paul and Eric Carr weren't really talking to each other during the Hits tour. I mean, I was talking to Bruce years ago, and he said there was tension on the bus because no one's talking to each other. And sometimes Eric would just sit there with his earplugs in, sunglasses on, and like, I'm ignoring you, and I'm making it very public that I'm ignoring you. So it was a bit uncomfortable. So I can see that there's a little bit of an edge there, that something's going on. Eventually, Kiss wound up selling Eric Carr's, or did not renew, let's put it that way, did not renew the trademark on Eric Carr's Fox makeup. And that's why we don't see the Fox in anything anymore, because they're just not interested in it. Whether that is Paul Stanley's call or it was a collective agreement, a collective between Gene and Paul, whether they decided that or whatever. But we're not going to see, we have the avatars coming up, right? Kiss Avatar. Yep. I don't think we're going to see a Fox there. We're probably not going to see Vinny in there because they have a strained relationship as well. So I think it's just going to be the original 4 makeup designs. I don't know who's going to be in the makeup, but it's not going to. Yeah. I don't think Eric Carr's going to be there.
It's funny because Gene and Paul, to me, I grew up loving Kiss, but they just have this sort of thing to me where if you're on the outs with them, you never get back in. And, they'll take a swipe at you one day, they'll say something nice the next. And it's too bad because I look at Eric Carr as a guy that, in my opinion, saved that band. And if he hadn't come in, that band would have been done. They wouldn't have had that run of no makeup and all that stuff.
Yeah, but you give Vinny some credit as well, because he was doing some fantastic writing. I mean, look what he contributed to Creatures of the Night and Lick It Up as well. I think he did almost every song on Lick It Up, except for, I think, one that Gene did the whole thing for. Can't remember which one. So, I mean, between the two of them, Eric gave them that sound, a really fantastic sound that carried them throughout the 80s. And, of course, you can't forget Creatures. What a sound on that. But Vinny also launched them into a different way of writing. But what happened with The Elder, that was actually the first time that they were really bringing in an awful lot of these outside writers.
Right.
So that was really the beginning of it. And you could say after they got rid of that power pop phase, I guess, from Dynasty and Unmasked, But after that, they forgot how to write songs by themselves, and they were always bringing in co-writers.
Get this book on Amazon. You will not be disappointed. Janet, thanks so much for doing this.
Oh, thanks so much, Sean. It's a pleasure to be here. Really appreciate it.
And we'll be back for volume 2, I promise you.